Section 3. Now I come to the next head, which is connected with this, where you make a distinction between the Christian doctrines and pretend that some are necessary and some not necessary. You say that some are abstruse and some quite clear. Thus you merely sport the sayings of others, or else exercise yourself, as it were, in a rhetorical figure. And you bring forward in support of this opinion that passage of Paul, Romans chapter 11, verse 33, "Oh, the depth of the riches, both of the wisdom and goodness of God." And also that of Isaiah chapter 40, verse 13, "Who hath holpen the Spirit of the Lord, or who hath been his counsellor?" You could easily say these things, seeing that you either knew not that you were writing to Luther, but for the world at large, or did not think that you were writing against Luther, whom, however, I hope you allow to have some acquaintance with and judgment in the sacred writings. But if you do not allow it, then, behold, I will also twist things thus. This is the distinction which I make, that I also may act a little the rhetorician and logician. God, and the Scripture of God, are two things, no less so than God and the creature of God. That there are in God many hidden things which we know not, no one doubts, as he himself saith concerning the last day, "Of that day knoweth no man but the Father," Matthew chapter 24, verse 36, and Acts chapter 1, 7, "It is not yours to know the times and seasons," and again, "I know whom I have chosen," John chapter 13, verse 18, and Paul, "The Lord knoweth them that are his," second book of Timothy chapter 2, verse 19, and the like. But that there are in the Scriptures some things abstruse, and that all things are not quite plain, is a report spread abroad by the impious Sophists, by whose mouth you speak here, Erasmus. But they never have produced, nor ever can produce, one article whereby to prove this their madness. And it is with such scarecrows that Satan has frightened away men from reading the sacred writings, and has rendered the Holy Scripture contemptible, that he might cause his poisons of philosophy to prevail in the Church. This indeed I confess, that there are many places in the Scriptures obscure and abstruse, not from the majesty of the thing, but from our ignorance of certain terms and grammatical particulars, but which do not prevent a knowledge of all the things in the Scriptures. For what thing of more importance can remain hidden in the Scriptures, now that the seals are broken, the stone rolled from the door of the sepulchre, and that greatest of all mysteries brought to light, Christ made man, that God is Trinity and unity, that Christ suffered for us and will reign to all eternity? Are not these things known and proclaimed even in our streets? Take Christ out of the Scriptures, and what will you find remaining in them? All the things therefore contained in the Scriptures are made manifest, although some places, from the words not being understood, are yet obscure. But to know that all things in the Scriptures are set in the clearest light, and then because a few words are obscure to report that the things are obscure, is absurd and impious. And if the words are obscure in one place, yet they are clear in another. But however, the same thing which has been most openly declared to the whole world is both spoken of in the Scriptures in plain words, and also still lies hidden in obscure words. Now therefore it matters not if the thing be in the light, whether any certain representations of it be in obscurity or not, if in the meanwhile many other representations of the same thing be in the light. For who would say that the public fountain is not in the light, because those who are in some dark, narrow lane do not see it, when all those who are in the open marketplace can see it plainly? Section 4. What you adduce, therefore, about the darkness of the Corinthian cavern amounts to nothing. Matters are not so in the Scriptures. For those things which are of the greatest majesty and the most abstruse mysteries are no longer in the dark corner, but before the very doors, nay, brought forth and manifested openly. For Christ has opened our understanding to understand the Scriptures. Luke chapter 24, verse 45. And the gospel is preached to every creature. Mark chapter 16, verse 15. Colossians chapter 1, verse 23. Their sound is gone out into all the earth. Psalm 19, verse 4. And All things that are written for our instruction. Romans chapter 15, verse 4. And again, all Scripture is inspired from above and is profitable for instruction. Second book of Timothy, chapter 3, verse 16. Therefore come forward, you and all the Sophists together, and produce any one mystery which is still abstruse in the Scriptures. But if many things still remain abstruse to many, this does not arise from obscurity in the Scriptures, but from their own blindness or want of understanding, who do not go the way to see the all-perfect clearness of the truth. As Paul saith concerning the Jews in the second book of Corinthians, chapter 3, verse 15, the veil still remains upon their heart. And again, if our gospel be hid, it is hid to them that are lost, whose heart the God of this world hath blinded. Second book of Corinthians, chapter 4, verses 3 and 4. With the same rashness anyone may cover his own eyes, or go from the light into the dark and hide himself, and then blame the day and the sun for being obscure. Let therefore wretched men cease to impute with blasphemous perverseness the darkness and obscurity of their own heart to the all-clear Scriptures of God. You therefore, when you adduce Paul saying his judgments are incomprehensible, seem to make the pronoun his refer to Scripture, whereas Paul does not say the judgments of the Scripture are incomprehensible, but the judgments of God. So also, Isaiah chapter 40 verse 13 does not say who has known the mind of the Scripture, but who has known the mind of the Lord. Although Paul asserts that the mind of the Lord is known to Christians, but it is in those things which are freely given unto us, as he saith also in the same place, first book of Corinthians chapter 2, verse 10 and 16. You see, therefore, how sleepily you have looked over these places of the Scripture, and you cite them just as aptly as you cite nearly all the passages in defence of free will. In like manner, your examples which you subjoin, not without suspicion and bitterness, are nothing at all to the purpose. Such are those concerning the distinction of persons, the union of the divine and human natures, the unpardonable sin, the ambiguity attached to which, you say, has never been cleared up. If you mean the questions of Sophists that have been agitated upon those subjects, well, but what has the all-innocent Scripture done to you that you impute the abuse of the most wicked of men to its purity? The Scripture simply confesses the Trinity of God, the humanity of Christ, and the unpardonable sin. There is nothing here of obscurity or ambiguity. But how these things are, the Scripture does not say, nor is it necessary to be known. The Sophists employ their dreams here, attack and condemn them, and acquit the Scripture. But if you mean the reality of the matter, I say again, attack not the Scriptures, but the Arians, and those to whom the gospel is hid, that through the working of Satan they might not see the all-manifest testimonies concerning the Trinity of the Godhead and the humanity of Christ. But to be brief, the clearness of the Scripture is twofold, even as the obscurity is twofold also. The one is external, placed in the ministry of the Word, the other internal, placed in the understanding of the heart. If you speak of the internal clearness, no man sees one iota in the Scriptures, but he that hath the Spirit of God. All have a darkened heart, so that even if they know how to speak of and set forth all things in the Scripture, yet they cannot feel them nor know them. Nor do they believe that they are the creatures of God, nor anything else. According to that of Psalm 14, verse 1, the fool hath said in his heart, God is nothing. For the Spirit is required to understand the whole of the Scripture and every part of it. If you speak of the external clearness, nothing whatever is left obscure or ambiguous, but all things that are in the Scriptures are by the Word brought forth into the clearest light and proclaimed to the whole world. Section 5. But this is still more intolerable. You're enumerating this subject of free will among those things that are useless and not necessary, and drawing up for us, instead of it, a form of those things which you consider necessary unto Christian piety. Such a form as certainly any Jew or any Gentile utterly ignorant of Christ might draw up. For of Christ you make no mention in one iota, as though you thought that there may be Christian piety without Christ, if God be but worshipped with all the powers as being by nature most merciful. What shall I say here, Erasmus? To me you breathe out nothing but Lucian, and draw in the gorging surfeit of Epicurus. If you consider this subject not necessary to Christians, away, I pray you, out of the field. I have nothing to do with you. I consider it necessary. If, as you say, it be irreligious, if it be curious, if it be superfluous to know whether or not God foreknows anything by contingency, whether our own will does anything in those things which pertain unto eternal salvation, or is only passive under the work of grace, whether or not we do what we do of good or evil from necessity, or rather from being passive. What then, I ask, is religious? What is grave? What is useful to be known? All this, Erasmus, is to no purpose whatever. And it is difficult to attribute this to your ignorance, because you are now old, have been conversant with Christians, and have long studied the sacred writings. Therefore you leave no room for my excusing you, or having a good thought concerning you. And yet the papists pardon and put up with these enormities in you, and on this account, because you are writing against Luther. Otherwise, if Luther were not in the case, they would tear you in pieces, tooth and nail. Plato is a friend, Socrates is a friend, but truth is to be honoured above all. For granting that you have but little understanding in the Scriptures and in Christian piety, surely even an enemy to Christians ought to know what Christians consider useful and necessary and what they do not. Whereas you, a theologian, a teacher of Christians, and about to draw up for them a form of Christianity, not only in your sceptical manner doubt of what is necessary and useful to them, but go away into the directly opposite and contrary to your own principles, by an unheard-of assertion declare it to be your judgment that those things are not necessary, whereas, if they be not necessary and certainly known, there can remain neither God, nor Christ, nor gospel, nor faith, nor anything else even of Judaism, much less of Christianity. In the name of the immortal God, Erasmus, what an occasion, yea, what a field do you open for acting and speaking against you? What could you write well or correctly concerning free will, who confess by these your declarations so great an ignorance of the Scripture and of godliness? But I draw in my sails, nor will I here deal with you in my words, for that perhaps I shall do hereafter, but in your own.